Welcome to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, the podcast celebrating the women redefining real estate development. I'm Molly McCabe, and alongside my co-host, Jill Ferrari, we're sitting down with the developers, the visionaries, and the builders whose projects and instincts are reshaping skylines and communities. What strikes you when you talk to the women in this space is just how expansive their thinking is. Profit and community impact are not competing priorities. In fact, they're part of the same calculation. And that mindset is producing some of the most innovative development work in North America. This is a conversation about what's being built, the deals, the risks, the pivots, and the wins. So let's get into it. Jill, would you like to introduce our guests? I'm so excited for this episode today.
I would love to. Our guests today are Marisol Chávez Valdés and Fabiola Alvarez Yurcisin. With a master's in urban design and decades shaping Mexico's real estate landscape, Maris brings a design-forward approach to industrial development. She serves as the Director of Real Estate Portfolio at Delteck, located in Monterrey, Mexico, and is at the forefront of the nearshoring boom, leading industrial and manufacturing development across the country and proving that even massive industrial projects can be built with intention, placemaking, and community in mind, building spaces that work for both industry and the people around them. So fantastic to have you here. Fabiola Alvarez Yurcisin is an urban planner, systems thinker, and incredible visual artist who serves as director of the Urban Land Institute Terwilliger Center for Housing in Washington, D.C. Her work sits at the intersection of housing, affordability, transit-oriented development, and community resilience, proving that the most durable cities are the ones designed with equity at their heart. Fabiola brings a rare dual lens to the built environment. From analyzing food deserts to reimagining transit corridors, Fabiola shows us what happens when creativity meets community-first development. We are so excited to have you both here. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to throw out something that we were actually just talking about before we got on, and that is we're talking about women in development, and both of you have dual last names. Can you talk a little bit about that? I would just love to lead with that because I think it's such an important component around your heritage and why that is.
Fabiola, you should answer this one.
Well, mine is complex. I think that so in general in Latin America, most people have two names. So you have your father's name and your mother's name. And that's how you go for most of your life. And in school, you write them both. And if you have a middle name, you have four names, right? And so in my case, it's a little more complex because it talks about immigration, because I migrated to the United States by marriage. And so my last name, Alvarez, is my father's name, and Yurcisin is my husband's last name. And so when people look at me and they are completely, utterly confused. But that's how it is since you're a child. So, yeah.
I have to add something else. Like in my mother's generation, it was super normal that the woman will take the last name of the husband, it will change it, like in the bank accounts, in her credit cards, in every place. And I will say in my generation, that's old in the past. And the normal thing to do is to keep your single last name, and then you will keep your father's and your mother's last name in your name. So yes, we have had this change in 25 year generation.
Well, I love that you're honoring both your mother and your father. I think that's such an important conversation to be having, and particularly in this. So now let me drop into more of a real estate question. Fabiola, you work at the intersection of housing equity and community resilience. Specifically, well, you're in D.C., but I know you work more broadly across North America. And Marisol, you're shaping industrial real estate and placemaking across Mexico. How would each of you define placemaking in your own work? Maybe Marisol, you want to start?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful for the invitation and having the opportunity to share with you. We're doing different in Deltack as fund managers. And for me, placemaking is about doing things right, the right way. Every time we do an acquisition, it's not only essential to understand its technical aspects, but also to grasp the reality of the part of the city in which we are investing. This means analyzing the social context to define what can truly be done with the investment that is going to make a change. And in this way, placemaking becomes a process of creating spaces that are meaningful and valuable for the community.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's a process, first and foremost, that capitalizes on the local assets first. So you're not bringing things, you're actually elevating what's there and being in community with it. And when you think about the complexity of the development process, you are trying to create an environment where the silos are broken down between the planners, the designers, the developers, the community, and we're all kind of engaging in more systemic thinking exercise and making sure that we're putting the conditions in place for not only the buildings, but the people that will live in them.
I'm so excited to be talking about all these things, but feel even more connected to you both because my last name is my maiden name. All the women in my family have kept the Ferrari name, whether, if they've been married. And my mother, after my father passed, she kept his name when she got remarried. So I love that you are keeping that heritage in your work and in your life. It's wonderful to hear. I'm really excited to hear about it. We've talked a little bit about placemaking, and industrial parks aren't really thought of as places in the human-centric sense. And in the United States, we have walled them off. But Deltack is building them with urban design thinking. Marisol, how do you approach creating a sense of place in industrial environments? It has to be difficult.
Yes, it is, but it can be done. Our goal is that the industrial sites become highly accessible. This is like the first step and connected to where employees live. By keeping this in mind, we aim to improve their quality of life while also giving companies the opportunity to hire more easily. And on the other hand, when we have the opportunity to develop a park from scratch, we are required to donate a portion of land to the municipality. In those cases, through placemaking and interviews with the surrounding community, we work to define a purpose to that land that will benefit the immediate neighborhood or the employees, allowing them to truly make it their own place, like in the long term. I will think this is well, for me, is that definitely those are the two most important issues that we're trying to land through placemaking before we acquire the land, and then this public space that we will be leaving behind. It will be the one that will make like the more big impact when we leave the building, because this is also very important to understand. We develop the building and then we sell it to another investment fund. So it's very important that the community that is already in place make it their own space, because they are the ones that are going to, taking care of it and do it their own space.
Yeah.
So you build it, so bring it through stabilization, and then you sell it to another investment fund.
Yes.
So in that case, you must have, and this may be a great place, Fabiola, for you to talk about. You must have restrictions. Are those restrictions or policies or particular requirements from the city or the community around how it's maintained, so that you can ensure all of that connectivity, all of the green space, all of that gets maintained as part of the longer term hold of the asset? Is that something you see, Fabiola, that policy can really drive? Marisol, is that something that the cities really require over that long period of time? What does that look like?
I will say it's a two-hand job. It has to be the local municipality involved. This is a must because they will own this site, but definitely the community is a very important driver to keep it like in a good state. But also the private sector, you know, the owner of the building will be interested in having it like in the most quality state. So I will say there are different players in place, and if you leave it only to the local municipalities, maybe it will be a risk in the long term, because normally there's not enough budget to have them like in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Fabiola.
No, I think that, I think that maybe if we just step back a little bit, just to give a little bit of a context when we're talking about industrial development, kind of in a border. So when we think about what's happening between the border with the United States and Mexico, there are really 6 mega regions. It's really like when we think about in the planning sense, they may not be under a metropolitan planning organization because they're two countries, but they really act like a region. And we just don't have the capacity to plan as we would a region because they're across a border, right? So then to Marisol's point, what are the leveraging points? So I think that's really important. So some of these 6 regions have around 15 to 20 million people that live on both sides and work and live in either Mexico or the United States, right? Depending on their profession, depending on their income, that varies. So that's kind of the context of where we're actually talking about this development happening. So it's really important to think about that integration of community in that context. So, of course, Marisol mentioned the leverage points. Of course, when you're starting in a development, that's when you want to partner with the municipality and think very intentionally about what will happen and who will be the steward of that property and with what partners, right? Because it's not happening. It's just, I think it's hard to explain what's really how like this boom is showing up. Like if you think about a place that you knew and that you passed through, those places are not longer pass-through places. They're actually places. They're communities. There's a need for permeability within them, right? We used to think of industrial sites as a place that you just pass through because there were just not necessarily very positive associations with it, and nobody actually lived near them, right? So because of the necessity of a regional context, you have to understand that people want to travel less. People want to live close in closer proximity. Or you may be developing industrial sites already near other communities that are currently existing, right? So that's the important thing of kind of elevating. So understanding what those leverage points are, in both borders, which will be different in the United States that they will be in Mexico. Marisol just mentioned the capacity for municipalities. Something very similar happens in the United States. And then you just have to figure out like who's going to be who's going to take care of that place, right? Because if it's owned by a municipality, maybe in Mexico that has less capacity, then the private sector is a very important partner. But we also see that in the United States with even more capacity for planning and maybe more resources, that it is really important that that place continues to serve the community and continues to ask as communities and growth happens, who is the benefiting from it, right? Because nothing is static, which is what happens with high growth areas. So I think that it is important to root ourselves in that context, which is kind of massive to think about, right? There are really millions and millions of people that are working and living within industrial sites now in the border of of Mexico and the United States.
Well, and I think that's a great macro approach, and I appreciate all the background. And it's hard. It's hard for us in the United States to visualize what this looks like because we are so used to industrial districts being separate from walkable communities. So I'm going to ask you both, Marisol, from the lens of an industrial developer, specifically what this looks like, and Fabiola as a visual artist and urban planner, what specifically are the features that are utilized to create placemaking? Are we talking about green space? Are we talking about other installations? What does it really look like to have an industrial development that is integrated in the community? Can you talk a little bit about it on the micro level? Just give us an example of a site that you've worked on and what the integrations were, the physical installations that made it a placemaking effort.
Yes, you have an incredible example. We are starting just right now a new park in Tijuana. This is a city, as Fabiola was mentioned before, that is in the border with the United States. And this site is already in a very dense space. There's a lot of people living in there. And the definition of the law, when you define this municipality site that you will donate to the local authorities, the law says that you can have it inside your park. You will have like a fence, the private line, and then you can have this green space like inside your industrial park. In this site, we decided to leave it outside, so the neighbors could really have access to it, and it will be definitely part of their urban, streets and connections. So this little difference, it makes a huge impact because it will be really their park. It's not a private park inside of the industrial zone, And then also we are trying to accompany with a private sector, the municipality, and also obviously our investment to have this equipped park as a result. Because the normal thing to do is that you maybe we have something green up to it, and that's it. And we're trying to really have like this soccer, court and some benches and some, this is gonna sound extremely extreme, but some shadows, because these sites are very hot. At Tijuana specifically, it comes like a lot of degrees in summer. So we're trying to do obviously a lot more than the law required to us in this kind of spaces. On the other hand, normally when the team does this placemaking, it's super sad, but normally the municipality will not demand like the basic infrastructure outside the park, like they are going to cross a highway with a very high speed and there's no bridge, a pedestrian bridge or even a sidewalk. You could see inside the park like everything beautiful, but in the border, in the outside, you don't even see a sidewalk. Obviously, illumination for the night, some landscape, like the basic stuff. So what we have done in the past in some projects is that we leave behind this, higher understanding of what we have to do in those sites. And it has become a great impact because the local authorities now understand what they can demand to the new developers, and
setting the bar high.
Yes, we're setting the bar high, and I will say that's the most impact, the bigger impact we have done in the past, because it's not just in our scale, in our sidewalk, we are impacting like a bigger zone, because the local authorities now understand that this can be done with the same budget, because I don't do this like making a huge capex in my underwriting. It's the same investment. Normally, obviously, when we have some strategies and we have some ahorros, some savings, then maybe we can say, okay, maybe some part of the savings, we can place it like in the placemaking plan. So that project is, I have very higher hopes to be a game changer in the zone. And I will be very, very happy to share it with you when it's done.
Yeah, well, I think Marisol speaks about like what the importance is of actually experiencing something. In the case of Mexico, as I mentioned, kind of giving my kind of this notion of where we kind of sitting in the intersection of what, and we think of the United States obviously having a different capacity than Mexican jurisdictions to require certain things, and to a certain extent is true. But I think that rather than an example, I would like just to say that for what I see in the intersection of industrial housing and placemaking is a lot of the terminology. Like, we need to be really intentional about what we're building and how are we referring to it. because when we think about community benefits, they really need to be defined. And Marisol is speaking about being kind of a trailblazer in Delteck of saying these are some of the community benefits that us as being beneficiaries of this asset can offer, right? And so in the work that we do in the Terwilliger Center through our technical assistance, invariably all my questions are about how do we develop more housing and how do we talk about housing? But in reality is like, how do we make this place be attractive for development? And a lot of it has to do with how do you incorporate the different visions and be intentional about gathering that for really a place to be kept in certain ways, incorporated, right? When I think about, like, we just did a panel in Lowell, Massachusetts, a mill town, right? And they asked us about all of this stuff, but they didn't ask us about their bridges and their connection to what it was, the old center of town and the new development and the transit. How are all those bridges connecting the community? And right now, they're actually not seen as assets, which when you think about it, it's like, how is that possible, right? So for me, the terminology, we're all agreeing in what are we trying to build? What do we consider an asset? Who's gonna help us maintain it? How are we gonna require it? And then and who's going to benefit for the long run of that, right? So I see a lot of the importance of that conversation with communities, with developers, to be really intentional about what are those outcomes that we're looking for.
Well, and you talk about bridges, and in Detroit here, we've seen a lot of existing bridges, because there's not a lot you can do with existing bridges, but art, painting those bridges, and the artful design of new bridges to attract people to those locations has been very successful here in Detroit. So, part of the questions that we wanted to talk to you about, Fabiola, is the role of art. Being such a talented artist, how do you see art playing a role in this placemaking process, whether it's industrial or just placemaking in general? What role does art play in bringing community to a space?
It's interesting. I always joke that I became an artist. I became an urban planner by being an artist in the city of Chicago, because I didn't know a lot. To your point about bridges, to your point about like how the city of Chicago burned down and they started over, right? They have like a gridded, and it's all super. Every community has its own. Ukrainian village has an incredible restaurants, and Greek village, and obviously Pilsen and Cicero, and the south side of Chicago has its own identity. And so it's really kind of very interesting to think about what the role was. And I wanted someone with my background in art to be in the table of planners and developers to make sure that there is an understanding that asking the right questions is really, really important to lean the collaboration and cooperation. But to be specific about the role of art, I don't have any romantic aspect of it. I think artists should be included in the process since the beginning, because one of the strengths that we are as we get trained is to ask really good questions when we're in an environment. So it's not, yes, the murals are great, and the programming for arts is really important, especially if you have access to schools and kids that can come to a place to generate that energy, right? Art has the ability to gather, which is really important, even though there's not a physical manifestation of an art piece that comes from it. So I think that's the first thing. First thing is asking really interesting and important questions in the development process about what the community identifies as assets. Because that's really where you could really start building your wins in the development process, right? Understanding if you are coming from the outside, you need to understand what the community sees that for you is invisible, but for them is really real and worth preserving and worth enriching and building upon. And so you start that conversation with how do you start community engagement, right? And I know, right now, especially for housing, we're in a very particular crossroads in the United States of how we develop housing. But in Mexico, there's a lot of informal housing that happens all around Marisol's development. It just happens. People live near those, the areas that they work. And with some intentionality, even informal housing can benefit with really intentional conversations, and then hopefully bring in more services to those communities, because in the vast majority of Latin America, informal development is more than 50% of what is developed on a daily basis, which is kind of surprising to think when we think about development in the United States.
It's like a tapestry. You're weaving all of these different threads together into something that's really beautiful. Uh, I'd love to have you talk, maybe Marisol, I'm thinking about the industrial projects that you're working on and this intentionality that you're bringing to it and bringing to the community. And I want to have you define for us, what is informal housing? And because for folks in the U.S., informal housing is not something we readily accept or see. And I know I've done some work in South Africa, and we've definitely seen some informal housing. But I'd love to have you talk about that, because it seems to me is organically, if community is building around the projects that you are putting in, and you're doing this with the mindset towards sustainable development, with a mindset of integrating intentionally with the community and bringing community benefits and giving those cities something to aspire to, and then those community members to aspire to. So one, maybe define for us, what does this mean? And then how might we integrate housing into what you're doing? Is there an opportunity to create some equitable housing? What does that look like? I know, big question.
Well, yeah. I will define informal housing like in two types. The first one, they don't have non-infrastructure behind, there's no streets, there's no water, there's no electricity. This is really, really informal. They live in very complicated quality of life. And it's sad, but I think this is the majority type that we will have like in the perimeter of the cities. And then more and more you will see informal housing in this Mexican that it realize the effort of buying a piece of land, that it will be in infrastructure, it will have light and will have electricity and it has water, but they will build their house like with their hands and the help of their family, like in a lot of years evolving. And I will say this type of informal housing is the one that is more nearby the industrial sites, they are a little bit more formal, but even though they are not very pretty, and normally they don't have this, they didn't have like the planning of public spaces, between them. So you will be walking these huge, larger streets, and you will not see an equipment like a school or like healthcare situations, and they are like these nuclear neighborhoods that are very far away from the center of the cities. And definitely when an industrial site comes along, it can happen like in both ways. First the industrial zone, or first the housing, and then the industrial comes along. Either way, it will be an improvement to this community, because you are bringing not only jobs, but you also are bringing a little bit more security, because, there will be some private policemen around this. And because of the industrial investment, there will be more sidewalks, and this will bring in some point even the public transportation system to these sites, It's super sad, but it comes like
in that order.
Yes, in that order. So definitely I think we cannot think in industrial if you are not thinking in housing. In fact, if you don't have employees, to hire, it cannot be possible to grow in the industrial sector. It's intertwined. Right now, I think the responsibility of funds like Deltack is to understand how we can help them to make a better housing side communities when the industrial building comes along, And this is new. I will say normally you will see like Ciudad Juárez. I don't know if you know the city in Chihuahua. It's like the the birth of the maquila in Mexico, between Mexico and United States, Ciudad Juarez had this terrific, not terrific, this horrible statistic of murders of women in the past. It has been very violent to live in Ciudad Juarez, like in some years. And then you walk the city and you will see all the major investment funds, national and international, in this city. You know, this a lot of square meters that will be producing airplanes and a lot of sophisticated issues, situations. But then the city is super lame in infrastructure, you know? So again, I think it's a responsibility to wake up and through the investment of the industrial growth that is happening in Mexico right now, to try to understand how we can help to improve the community of this informal housing you were talking about, Molly.
You mentioned on an earlier call that we had, you were just talking about the airplanes. And I remember you mentioned an earlier call about the women working in those manufacturing facilities. Can you talk about what you learned in terms of why they chose women to work in those manufacturing facilities, how they came from the community, and maybe what the impact was back on the community to have these women working in those facilities?
Yes. Well, it's awesome. You really, you couldn't believe it until you live it. You have to go, because these fabrics, these industrial buildings, first of all, they are like incredible in investment. You know, they have air conditioner, the lighting, the space. Obviously, it feels like you are in a hospital. You know, but yeah, they are doing parts of airplanes. And the first time I did an interview with these guys, I was amazed that all the floor was full with women. You know, they were doing like all this working craft situation, and I talked to the manager. Oh my God, what is happening here? Because they were all women. You won't see one guy like just in the other corner, you know. And he told me, you know what? We have been doing like 30, 40 years of aerospatial industry in Chihuahua. This is in the Ciudad de Chihuahua, not in Ciudad Juarez. And it's incredible that the craftsmanship you need to do this right, the trajectory has understood to us that the woman has better abilities to concentrate and do it like in a perfect way. And that day in specific, they were celebrating that they won like this huge contract for the following 15 years to industrial facility like in Norway, like in a very far away country with a lot of positive things different from Mexico. And he was super proud that he has just won it because the quality of what they were doing, you know? And yes, it's incredible, obviously, that the mom or the sister it's working in a facility like this will be in some point like you know, it will have an impact in their family directly. I will say like years to come. You know, right. This is incredible, because you are not just seeing a woman that has these incredible credentials, like a technician. You know, it's very well paid in a very, I will say, unique way to work, because it's in a space that is air conditioned. It has a Commodore facility to eat, you know, in incredible, a cafeteria, super well placed. So definitely it will improve her life and her family life. You know, this is awesome.
So that kind of brings us to a question that we talked about it on an earlier call, and that is how you got where you are, Marisol. You've talked about being the only woman in the room when talking to investors, or being part of an all-female team. But part of the mission of Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground is to encourage emerging developers across North America. So help us and help emerging developers in Mexico, emerging female developers in Mexico in particular, understand how you got where you are today at Deltack. It's such an impressive position. What's your story?
Oh, okay. How long? How many time do we have?
Just long enough
Well,
to let Fabiola share hers as well.
yeah,
Yes,
no.
exactly.
In a short version, I studied architecture and then I did a master's degree in urbanism. And right now is very funny because even though I'm in a fund, an investment fund, in a lot of ways, I think the way I think in my academic, trajectory helps to approach our problems or to do our
Yes.
planning in the future in a different way. I think a lot of the innovation that we're trying to do as fund investors, it can rely in that trajectory, that academic trajectory for myself. But also, I have to share with you that the TAC is part of a larger group that is called Grupo Delta, and this company that has been in Mexico like 50 years around, it has in their DNA this vision, this purpose on making better communities, from the start. So this is obviously an incredible ecosystem to grow these kind of things. On one hand, to really have in the top of the list the priority of doing things right. But on the other hand, having a woman in this chair, I will say it is possible because this group has been taking decisions. All the decisions they take, they're a long-term vision,
Yes.
and so this ecosystem is what had made this happen. But also, I want to share with you that I never dreamt to have this position, and when I entered the group, what I have really understood for myself, for me, being economically independent is my way of translating liberty. If I want to be a human that is really free, even though I have a husband or my parents or whatever in a very economic situation that it's okay, I have to, have for myself independence and to have decision in investment, etc. So when you understand that, and then I have this incredible opportunity of entering this group that really their values and minds are very aligned. Every time they ask me to do a step up in a higher role, I have to tell you I was never prepared. I didn't have the credentials, Really, I really can share you that. But I never say no. It was, okay, let's try it. I know that even if I fail, I will grow with this experience, And I really I think also this way of being is a very in health of the way of my parents have, educated me. They love to help in their environment, and in my house. You have to have a purpose in life, you have to make the air you breathe count every day. So this is the way I lived since I was a kid. And when I think you have a workplace and a position and an ecosystem that helps you be a better human self, it's like everything is aligned.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful answer. I love that.
And I have questions like Marisol is being very, very, she has an incredible trajectory and also a story of resilience that is really inspiring, right? I think that we are what we come from. I think that
Yes.
us Latina women are very aware of that. My mother is one of the first women engineer in the whole of Mexico. He's a chemical engineer. She made more money than my dad when they got married. My father will always say that she married the smartest woman he knew, and he was just lucky to sneak her. So I think that it was just one of those things that, as Marisol said, I mean, it's very important. My grandmother was a real estate investor in this case. She asked the question, are we going to be the part of the community, or are we going to gentrify by this acquisition? How are we going to think about how we are within that context? And it continues to be the kind of DNA. So I have a lot of parallels as what Marisol said. A life of purpose was always something that was center. Was something we discuss. What did you learn? Where do you fail? And failure was kind of that important DNA also. So if you didn't know something, you just need to find that person that knows the answer. And in this case, a lot of times it's either Molly or Jill for me, where I am. So
it's very kind.
It's very, very lucky. But yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new to the space of housing. For me, I work in housing because it is the most direct way to affect equity. Your zip code defines more than your DNA, more than the wonderful things we're talking about here about purpose and your education and all that. Where you live, your zip code is actually more important than all those nice things. Yeah. And so when I learned that, I could never turn back. And so it's the most adjacent thing for an artist studio because you need a place to live. And so I think housing is one of those interventions in a process of living that can have the greatest impact in a human life. And so that's what I wake up every day and try to impart in, regardless in the environment that you find yourself in. And yes, many times, like Marisol has said, in the job I have right now, many times I'm around incredible experts and I learn from them, but many times I also don't know what I'm getting myself into. And I feel that there's something to be leaned on that, right? That there's a quality of women that take risks in a kind of a controlled environment. And without that, I don't think we will have the lives that we lead. But I also think maybe it has to do with the fact that many times we are put in positions because of our bodies and our journeys that we just don't have the information. So we get comfortable with that instead of always navigating the world with thinking that you have the answer and you know. And being open to asking questions is always a way to bring more people to your tent, to know, experience and get to know other professionals, and build partnerships for you to be successful and for this other community organization, whatever you're engaging with, to also be successful. Yeah. So it set the table for more of a win-win because you're not coming with knowledge, you're coming with curiosity, you're coming with the desire to do the job. And that's just a very different orientation and how to engage professionally.
One of the things that I think Jill and I have both learned through this, and I hear through the thread that you're both talking about, is how both your past and your heritage, but the people around you who you grew up with, who you care for today, how that shapes you and how it shapes how you are looking at the world, what lens you're looking through that. And sort of we would have, I might have called it previously maybe a dual caregiving phase, but I think it's more than dual. I think it's more fully centric caregiving because you're focused on the community as well. And so I want to ask you, if you sort of look back at your career, your current life, what would you think your superpower is that comes from your individual superpower that comes from all of these things that you have just talked about? It just feels as if you have some very unique and interesting experiences that I think will help other women think about how they move into development, how you've lived your lives, and be very purposeful in doing that. So if you could identify any sort of a superpower, I can think of a few, but I'll let you think of your own first.
Okay. Fabiola, well, I'm thinking one of the top in the list that it will be resilience. I don't know the exact definition you have in mind, but obviously the journey has been rough. it's not easy, you know. We are great in looking at it was easy, as it was easy, but definitely it's not. I will say resilience is an incredible superpower because I understand it as you are capable of failing, you know, and then come back up. It's another day to do it again, or to understand it better, or to have, you know, another team around, or another friend that will really help you in whatever you are dealing with. And for me, it has been an incredible asset to grow in. Indeed, I think one of the most difficult part of my professional story is when I become a mom. It was very difficult for me. I was not prepared for it, even though I planned it like in a long row. I become a mom with my 38th birthday. I was very old from Mexico's standard.
Yes.
I was almost 40, and the second one arrived when I was 40. So in reality, I was not prepared on doing both jobs. In the way I envisioned it, like the way I wanted to be a mom and the way I wanted to be this executive. And with a lot of crashes and a lot of situations that I had to overcome, I understood that I was not perfect, and it wasn't going to be perfect when I was being a full mom. Maybe I was not being the most incredible executive, and then when I was being the incredible executive raising capital in Timbuktu, then maybe I wasn't in that moment the best mom at all, but it's okay. Like, you understand what's important, and you have an incredible team of friends and family around, and I think resilience will be the answer.
By you, Fabiola.
I think that, Marisol said it so well. I think that capacity to the next day, just give it another try, like in all aspects of life, not just in your professional life. If you spoke not kindly to your kid, the next morning is an opportunity to say, wasn't my best self, but guess what? Today I'm going to try it again. And so I think it is, giving yourself a little bit of grace and understanding that you could show up and give it another try. And I think that shows over time in how you present to your friends, to your community, to your family. I also think for me personally, I was always very different. So Marisol is talking to having a child at 39. My last one was at 35. By the time I had my last child, I didn't know any one of my friends in Mexico that did not have 3 kids with the people that I grew up with. And so very different, very unique. All of my friends are in Mexico. I'm the only one that has left. All of my family is in Mexico. I'm the one that doesn't live there. So artists are celebrated by their uniqueness. They're not celebrated by being the same as other people in the pack. And so I've done a lot of work to feel comfortable with that. I was born this way, kind of to, to really paraphrase Lady Gaga. So this notion of truly, that's the way I've seen myself. I always find that you will, if you are authentic, people see that. Even if you maybe have the wrong question or maybe don't have all the answers, people do recognize that. And so when I think about a superpower, is showing up as yourself and giving it again, that capacity, that resilience to give it another try. It may be the next hour, it may be the next day, or it may be the next week. But recognizing, hey, I did not show up in the best sense, but I always have an opportunity to do so again, and just keep building on that. And then you turn around and you're like, it wasn't easy, but it certainly was fun, and you find amazing people along the way. Again, I think because you drive with authenticity, I think that there is a currency that I value tremendously in myself and in others.
But, it's interesting. I think you both share a superpower that shows up in different ways. Marisol, you talked about the community space around your industrial developments. And in the United States, we leave those as green space most of the time, just creating a barrier between the community. You are very intentional about how you invest in the community, the physical community around your developments. And Fabiola, you are very intentional about investing in your professional community. You have a very large network. You're part of an organization that has thousands and thousands of members. And there are, professionals that are part of that network, but don't invest as intentionally as you do in connecting fellow members of that network, of bringing people together, convening. And I think that however you want to phrase that, just the intentionality and the passion you both have for investing in community is a superpower that you share. It's pretty cool to see.
And I would say generosity of spirit and
Yes.
heart connection. I feel that from both of you, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think when you work in one of the things that I had to learn, to your point, Jill, about being as part of the Urban Land Institute and its network, it has that power of convening. But I do feel that what Molly's saying, I think that the people that really thrive, even in those environments, regardless of gender, are those that are very good about understanding what their strengths are and what other strengths people can bring to the table. Because development, as Marisol and we've been talking, is inherently really complex. This is not something. This is not a boulder you can push up the hill by yourself, right? It requires a team. It requires iteration. It requires a lot of learning. You make mistakes, and those mistakes can be really expensive, and the risk is high. And so through all that process, and then if you add community, that community is great, but community, especially in housing, can be a serious resistance force, and you have to figure out how to weave it together for it to be a positive force to build a win-win development process, right?
Yes.
And so, but I have learned that through ULI, and I also feel really lucky that I'm in the organization that I am because of that. But I also think that the people that thrive within the development within ULI and in each of their local communities is because they see that. And a lot of them are women, to be honest. I think that there's something about that navigation ability that we're specifically suited for.
Agreed. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground. Both of us are so grateful to you both for sharing your stories, your thought leadership on industrial placemaking, community investment, and just this international approach to workforce development and workforce housing. Just so grateful to you both for being here.
I was just going to ask Marisol and Fabiola two questions. One, how can people connect with you? So what's the best way for them to reach out to you? You may give them website, you may give them your email, whatever is most valuable to you. And then do you have anything in particular that you're working on that maybe our community can help you with? Do you have a project? Are you looking for capital? Do you have a particular need that would be useful to the community can bring back to you?
Fabiola?
I mean, I have my website as an artist. I always think of, and it's my name, fabiola.com.mx. So if you want to see my artwork, that's where it is. And what am I working with? I'm working with many different communities across the United States to bring technical assistance to accelerate the production of housing. So if you're interested in that, hit me in LinkedIn, or my email is my first name, my last name @uli.org. And I would love to recruit you as a panelist to bring your expertise at the local level and communities that can benefit from it.
Wonderful. Marisol?
Excellent. You can find me in LinkedIn as well as Marisol Chávez Valdés. And also you can visit our site, deltack.mx, to see a little bit more of what we're doing and where we're doing it. And definitely I can invite all investors that have interest in having some piece of this incredible economic growth that is happening in Mexico. We're always seeking investors to our funds, but also we are also all time interviewing developers to do this growth, because we as fund we do what we do through a platform of investors. All of them mostly are from Mexico, but also we have teamed up with teams that come from America, from other countries that are trying to do something in our country. So if I can help with that, I will be super glad.
Wonderful.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, we hope you all found today's conversation as inspiring and empowering as Molly and I did. If you loved this episode, please make sure to subscribe to Breaking Ceilings, Breaking Ground, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know a woman in real estate development whose story should be shared, please reach out through our website, www.breakingceilingsbreakingground.com. We'd love to feature her. Don't forget to leave us a review and share this podcast with your entire network. Together, we can continue to amplify the voices of women shaping the future of real estate. Until next time, keep breaking ceilings and breaking ground.
Thank you.
Thank you both.